The Lex Hortensia, passed in 287 BCE, stands as one of the most decisive turning points in the constitutional history of the Roman Republic. It was enacted during the final phase of the long social and political struggle known as the conflict of the orders, a centuries-long tension between the patricians, Rome's traditional aristocratic elite, and the plebeians, the broader body of common citizens. By the early 3rd century BCE, plebeians had already secured important rights, including access to magistracies and legal protections. Yet deep inequalities still remained in political influence and economic conditions. The Lex Hortensia addressed one of the most critical remaining issues: whether decisions made by plebeian institutions could bind the entire Roman state. The law was introduced under the dictatorship of Quintus Hortensius, who was appointed specifically to resolve a severe political crisis. At the time, Rome faced internal unrest as plebeians, burdened by debt and frustrated by aristocratic dominance, withdrew from the city in what is often described as the final secession of the plebs, likely to the Janiculum Hill. This act of collective protest was a powerful political tool the plebeians had used before, effectively halting the functioning of the state. In response, Hortensius enacted the Lex Hortensia as a compromise that would restore unity and stability without resorting to violence or prolonged conflict. The central provision of the Lex Hortensia was both simple and revolutionary. It declared that resolutions passed by the Plebeian Council, Concilium Plebis, known as plebiscita, were legally binding on all Roman citizens, including patricians, without requiring approval from the Senate. Before this law, plebiscites technically applied only to plebeians, unless they were ratified by the Senate or accepted by other assemblies. This requirement had allowed the aristocracy to maintain indirect control over legislation. By removing this barrier, the Lex Hortensia effectively elevated the Plebeian Council to a full legislative body whose decisions carried the force of law across the Republic. This reform had profound implications for Roman governance. It significantly weakened the institutional dominance of the Senate and the patrician class, at least in formal legal terms, and strengthened the political agency of the plebeian majority. Magistrates such as the tribunes of the plebs gained greater legislative power, as they could now propose measures directly to the Plebeian Council with the assurance that these decisions would become law. In this sense, the Lex Hortensia marked the culmination of the conflict of the orders, symbolizing the formal political equality between patricians and plebeians, even if social and economic inequalities persisted. However, the practical impact of the Lex Hortensia was more complex than its legal clarity might suggest. While it opened the door for broader participation, Roman politics continued to be heavily influenced by elite networks, patron-client relationships, and the prestige of powerful families. Many leading plebeians themselves had become part of a new political elite, often called the nobiles, who dominated high office regardless of their original class background. As a result, although the law removed formal barriers, real power remained concentrated among a relatively small group of influential individuals. Even so, the Lex Hortensia remains a landmark in the development of Roman political thought and institutions. It demonstrated the Roman capacity to adapt their system through compromise and legal innovation, rather than through outright revolution. By granting binding authority to the collective decisions of the plebeians, Rome took a significant step toward a more inclusive political structure, one that, while far from modern democracy, laid important foundations for later ideas about popular sovereignty and the rule of law.